Hello, and welcome to So You Think You Can Rule Persia, the podcast where we rated and reviewed all the kings of Persia from Antiochus to Yazdegerd III. And welcome to the first episode of The Rounds. I am Sariel, and my pronouns are they, them.
And I'm Umberto, my pronouns are he, him. Hello, everybody, and welcome indeed to the first episode of The Rounds. We drew them all last time, we figured out who is going to be fighting who, and well, today we have our first real competition. Sariel, I envision disagreements. I certainly don't really know who is going to come out on top right now. I know who is not going to come out on top, but I don't know who is.
That's me.
So we'll find out who they are. So let's meet our contestants, Ariel, because we are now in the gorgeous paradise gardens we've been sending everyone out to. But it is time at last for a royal hunt, where people will compete with each other and see who actually gets to make it through, or who would rather come to an unfortunate accident in the woods.
That's the competition?
As we've seen do Euro rounds. Different.
Not to, see who hunts the best, but who makes it out alive. So we're hunting humans here, is what you're saying.
Exactly. I mean, all of these people have killed people. They might as well. Today's contestants are Darius the Great, our top scorer with 80.1 points, Seleucus I Nicator with 65.8 points, Antiochus IV Epiphanes with 47.2 points, Alexander the Great with 71.7, and Sinatruces I 23.9. Sariel, do you have any immediate thoughts coming out here about our contestants? Anybody who you have stronger memories about? Somebody who you remember nothing about?
I think
what's your starting position?
It makes sense that he would be our top scorer because he is the best story out of all the kings. And there's a reason why most people know about him or know of his name. Even if you don't really know much about the history of Persia, it is likely that you have encountered some sort of mention to him.
Yeah, fair.
I also want to say Alexander the Great, probably even better known. I don't want him to win.
I mean, that's definitely going to make it more difficult for him to win at this point.
Yep.
Then I'll try and remind you of his qualities, just in case maybe you've forgotten how cool he is, and maybe he'll be better than other people. So we'll have to see how that all plays out, because well, it's a tough competition, and only 2 of these 5 people can move on to the next series of rounds after this episode. So we'll have to decide 2 out of these 5 to actually succeed.
And I want to ask about Nicator. I remember us mentioning his name. I remember, we gave him Shahanshah for a reason. Was he one of the kings that we didn't expect much from, that was a child king of some sort, that then rose to the occasion and did a wonderful job?
No, Seleucus is actually, we'll go into detail in a later section, but Seleucus is the founder of the Seleucid Empire, right. And he is one of the many generals after the death of Alexander that basically took the empire together, almost reunified it, but then was murdered just before he could do it. So he is very cool, but the question is, is he cooler than Alexander or Darius or Antiochus IV or Sinatruces? Or is he actually just falling a bit short? And yes, he's generally cool, but not cool enough.
Okay, give me a short summary of each of them, assuming I don't remember anything about them. Because, maybe some people have prepared for these episodes and have re-listened to the people we're going to be rating. But not even I have done that, so I wouldn't expect it. I would really appreciate a recap, even of those who I do remember, just to keep everything in mind.
Yeah, of course. But first, Serial, I thought that during these rounds it would be nice to sort of take a trip down memory lane and go through all our categories and remember who the best and who the worst were in each field.
Sure, that should be interesting.
So we can see how that did, how the different dynasties compare against each other. What does it look like? Who knows?
You have a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah, exactly. So our first category today that we're going to be reviewing is final moments, which is basically how interesting were the king's deaths. Do any deaths come to mind, Serial? Do any of them pop up? Let's see if you can remember any of our top 5.
Alexander's death will forever haunt me.
Fair.
I remember not in this episode, but give me a second.
Oh yeah, just this is out of everyone, not necessarily just our players today.
I remember, of course, Khosrow II, because I did draw that one really beautifully for a reason.
Yes, that was very good.
I remember some sillier ones, which I don't even think are part of our Shahanshahs, like Shapur III, who died buried under a tent. Because I also drew that one. Turns out if I draw things, I tend to remember them better.
Yeah, that's a good method of note taking.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, let's go, Serial, through the top 5, and we're going to have to break some ties, so you'll have to help me out with that.
Sure.
Because our top score, as you mentioned, is Khosrow II with a 10 out of 10. He had the best possible death, the most interesting, the coolest one. Because basically, he was, as we saw, in charge of a large, vast empire, but then things started crumbling around him. He was overthrown by his son, and when the guards came to arrest him, Khosrow simply dressed himself in his finest armor, sat under a tree, and waited for them to come and take him away. And then eventually, when he was imprisoned, Khosrow was kept alive for a few more days while all of his children, all of his sons, were killed outside to stop the usurpation of the throne, and his favorite son and heir, Mardin Shah, was killed right in front of him to show him that there was no hope left. And then at last, Khosrow himself was shot full of arrows.
Yep.
So that is our undisputed most interesting death.
It's so dramatic.
Khosrow II with
such a good story, so
10.
terrible, so sad, so like heroic. I don't know. It has everything. Is it true?
Yeah, it's all together, which is just very much.
Probably true. I'm sure it has been embellished
Yeah,
through the
exactly.
years,
It's very literary, but horrible things happen. And then we have 3 people tied for second place, Serial. You'll have to help me out deciding which you think is most interesting. First of these is Bardia with a 9 out of 10. Bardia, you remember, was supposedly already dead a few years before because he had been killed by his brother. But then we have a whole story about how...
The uncertainty truly is what makes this one.
Very much so. And then we have a whole nice scene where we have Darius the Great going in with all his buddies, killing Bardia in hand-to-hand combat. It's a very personal scene, and we really enjoyed that. We thought it was a good one. This was one of our earlier episodes, so we were very impressed by all this. So that's Bardia to keep in mind, Serial. Next up is another one that you enjoyed very much. It is Sogdianus with the Ash Room. Sogdianus, you remember, usurped the throne, but was eventually dethroned himself and was put in a room full of ash to suffocate to death by our very own beloved Parysatis.
Yeah, I was going to say, this feels like her doing,
yes.
Right? That is so intense and...
Yeah, it's absolutely her.
Plain evil. Overkill.
And, and then... Yeah. And then, last of this set of tied for second is Alexander the Great, as the one that you remembered most prominently. The fact is that he died due to mysterious circumstances. We don't know if he was poisoned, if he just got malaria or some other swamp disease, or if he just drank himself to death, or what happened exactly, we're not sure. And the possibility that sort of concerned you and made you increase his score after a while was that there is a theory that since his body did not decay after his death, before it was mummified, it is possible that he was just in a coma and still alive, and then was mummified while alive, which is what did him in eventually. So that's the one that sort of stayed with you.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder why. You can't blame me.
It is pretty terrifying, so fair enough. So, Serial, rank these 3 second places in order. So give me a second, a third, and a fourth place. Who do you think is the most interesting of the 3 that I just mentioned?
I feel like it's not entirely fair because there's been so much research and so much myth and so much legend and so much talk about Alexander in general. Not just as part of the Persian Empire, but just as part of any
just as a
military history of the West. That his death has been so speculated about, it turns immediately into a topic of conversation. To me, what definitely scarred me the most was the fact that he might have been mummified while alive, but it's still quite interesting, the fact that we don't quite know if he drunk himself to death, if he got some sort of disease like malaria or tuberculosis or something similar, or if he was poisoned, which I don't truly believe, but I think that's more of a coping story people tell about, like, oh, this great general. It couldn't be that he just died because of, a normal thing humans die of, like a disease.
Yeah.
Then we have Bardia, like you mentioned. The entire character is so veiled in mystery. I think it was mostly a good story, but not ultimately not that interesting. I think part of it is the myth of Darius talking about how they had this one-on-one combat. But it's not very verifiable, I guess. Who else did we have? We had the Ash Room.
And then we had Sogdianus with the Ash Room, yes.
Sogdianus. That is just so intense. And this goes entirely to Parisatis. Like, this is not about Sogdianus.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This is purely about her and her, like, inhumane, horrible methods. That woman was cold and calculating and had a lot of anger within her. But I think this is an important thing to point out in the history of Persia, I guess, that this is a thing that happened.
This exists and is still going on.
And then we have Khosrow II, right?
Khosrow II is already first. He's absolutely first. Just on scoring, we've just made him as high as possible.
That I still agree with that. Then I think I would put them as next, second Alexander, third Sogdianus, fourth Bardia.
Okay, very good. So,
do you agree?
We're ranking the most. I think that's a good argument. I like what you said. I think that Alexander's he's Alexander. I mean, yeah, fair enough. There's so many possibilities. It's very cool, and so that's pretty impressive. And the Ash Room is just a classic. We've just referred to the Ash Room so many times, and there we go. And so, Sarah, last we need to decide who is fifth place, because we have 3 contenders tied at 8 points. The contenders are Phraates IV, who was the husband of Musa, who was murdered by her, and all his sons were exiled, and he was
True.
just left alone and killed. That was pretty cool. Next up is Sharbaraz, the general who usurped the throne in Ctesiphon towards the end of our podcast, and then during a military parade was just stabbed by one of his guards, which was a fun occasion. And then also we have Yazdegerd III, our last king, who, well, we remember after fleeing to the ends of the earth, he was eventually killed by a miller who didn't really know who he was, but just wanted to take his rich clothes, which is very sad, but yeah. So who do you think out of these three has the best option? Who do you think deserves 5th place?
How did Musa kill her husband?
We don't really know. That's the problem. We don't have much detail. We know that she exiled all of his heirs, and then he died, and then he was killed, but
so I think this is interesting in the sense of Musa is interesting, but the death itself is...
Yeah, of course.
You know.
And we have the comedy of Shabraz just saying, "Hooray, I'm king," and then stab. No, you're not.
That was very funny. I did.
And then Yazdegerd is the more tragic. He died with him. The empire dies. It's a whole very, it's a very dramatic scene overall.
I think I prefer that one, or that makes for a better story overall. And I think I would put...
Okay.
Who was Musa's husband?
Phraates the Fourth.
Phraates the Fourth. I don't even remember who. Like, this is the... Phraates the Fourth, it's not...
She got a Shahanshah.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't.
Exactly.
So.
I don't think his death was that interesting, other than in the context of her coming to the throne.
Fair. Okay, so, well, our total, then let's go through it. Our first is Khosrow II. Next we have Alexander the Great. Then Sogdianus with the Ashroom. Bardia with the murder. Then we go with Yazdegerd III with the tragic end of the empire. Shabraz with the surprise stabbing. And Phraates IV with the Musa murder. And I'll quickly run you through which are the worst deaths. The least interesting deaths. And, well, there isn't much comparison to be done here, but I'm going to basically list them in order of the highest scorers who had the least interesting deaths. Because, you wouldn't expect that otherwise.
Yeah.
So, first of all is Darius the Great. Darius the Great scored a 0 for his death, but he is our highest scorer, as we've seen. He has the least interesting death. He just dies of old age.
Yeah. That's the thing. It is quite uncommon to die of old age, and it's like, oh, that's a feat in and of itself. I can't speak today. In and of itself, but as a death is not that interesting. It is interesting in the fact that it doesn't happen often, but doesn't make for a great story. Okay. The only one that is less interesting than that is just fading into history, and we don't know what happened.
Yeah, exactly. And well, then that's the one we have for second place is Cyaxares, another Shahanshah. He scored very high, 57.75 points, but he got a 0 death because again he just fades into history. He does all the cool things, and then eventually we stop hearing about him, so we presume he died. That's it. Not very interesting at all. After that is Musa, another Shahanshah with 49.75. But she again gets a 0 because she again kind of fades away because she's been exiled from her kingdom. She's been dethroned. But eventually she just disappears, and we don't know where she ended up. We don't know if she was killed during the usurpation or if she fled somewhere else. It's very unclear. We have no proof of anything either way. My personal fan fiction version is that she just went to Rome and lived a happy life forever and ever, but, we don't know.
We can believe, we can choose to have this headcanon. Nobody's gonna stop us, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. And next up, we have Vologases I with 37.8 points. He is not a Shahanshah, but again, his death was very unimpressive because we don't know much. He just died of natural causes. Well, hey, I'm sure they're happy about not being murdered. They're probably fine with it. And yeah, Vologases I didn't really have an exciting death. We just know that he reigned reasonably well for several years and did a good enough job, and he passed the throne to his son. It was very unremarkable as Parthian kings' succession go. So brilliant. And fifth and last of our not very good deaths is Antiochus, our first episode. From the start, he got 32.8 points, which is quite impressive in total, but his death was a 0. I'm kind of surprised Herodotus didn't give us a mysterious death that has a moral to the story, but yeah, Antiochus just disappears and leaves the throne to Phraortes. We don't really know. I mean, there is a vague suggestion that he may have died as a prisoner in Assyria, according to other sources, but we don't really know, so that's it.
Yeah.
And now, Serial, we're just going to have a quick look at what the different dynasties were like in Final Moments. Do you have any expectations for which dynasty had the most interesting deaths? If you had to guess, which one do you think is like, oh no, this one definitely is that?
Oh, I don't know. All the kings are so jumbled in my head. I can't remember who is from which dynasty. Statistically, I guess whichever we had the most kings of, because either in period of time or because it was a period of turmoil, people tend to get killed in more creative ways. But
definitely a good strategy, yeah. So what I'm going to do here, Serial, for the next episodes as well, is that I'm going to give you the average score for everybody for each dynasty in Final Moments in order. And then I'm going to tell you how they rank according to the Bayesian adjusted mean. What is this, Serial? Well, all math nerds will know that a Bayesian adjusted mean is a way to sort of balance out the fact that some dynasties have more kings and other have fewer. So it's kind of unfair to compare a group where there's like 2 people, but one of them was really cool, compared to a group where there's 100 people and 65 of them were really cool. It doesn't really compare properly. So have these different methods. Essentially, you can look it up if you like, but the point is that I've adjusted the statistics based on the number of kings in each category.
That's very nice.
So let's start out with the general average scores. Yes. So start with the general average scores. The most interesting deaths are under the Seleucids, where they have a 4.33 out of 10 average for their interesting deaths. Honestly, I was kind of surprised about that, but I think that it's a lot of deaths in battle, a lot of assassinations. I think the sources are also helping us a lot. So that is quite convenient because we have a bunch of Greek and Roman sources which help us out. Next up are the Achaemenids with 4.19 out of 10, which is, again, very interesting because we have a lot of Greek sources for them. We have a lot of Herodotus. I mean, Final Moments, we have Bardia there who is representing very strongly. We just discussed it. We have Sogdianus with the Ash Room who's representing, so that's very impressive. And yeah, overall, the Achaemenids, good sources, interesting deaths. Next up are the Argeads, which are essentially, there's only 3 of them, so this is a bit cheating, but Alexander the Great was so impactful that we kind of had to give it to him. And then also we have the death of Baby Alex and Philip Aridaeus, where it's sort of a bit more of a balance, where they had to, they also had suitably tragic ends, so I think this greatly improves their average. And then moving on, we have the Sassanids. The Sassanids where, well, we have the Shahrbaraz death, the Yazdegerd III death. We have a bunch of people. We have the Khosrow II death. I forgot that. Where we have a bunch of people with dramatic ends. Where we have a lot of help from the Book of Kings, the Shahnameh, because that's a cool literary document that is talking about us. So they have a good advantage, but on the other hand, we do also have a lot of minor kings which just either disappear or have less interesting times, so that's where the Sassanids suffered a little bit more. Next up are the Arsacids with 2.08 out of 10 for final moments, which is kind of understandable. We didn't have many sources for them. It's just, they had some information. We have some ideas. We have Phraates IV with the Musa death, but overall, it's not too much information that we can hold on to for the Arsacids. So that's why they suffer a bit more. And last of all, we have the Medians. The Medians with 1.5 out of 10 for final moments. The Medians, since a lot of them are basically mythical, their death is just disappearing into nothingness.
That was my thought too.
They suffer a lot from that. They're just gone, mostly. And yeah, so those are the main scores we have per dynasty, and let me just reorder them based on Bayesian adjusted mean, so you know who suffered more. Based on that, we have the Seleucids up top, Achaemenids second, Argeads third. All that is as stable as before. But then we get surprises with... but then we get the Sassanids with 3.11. And afterwards, there is a flip between the Arsacids and the Medians, where the Medians are 5th in position and the Arsacids are 6th because, well, there's a lot more Arsacids to have uninspiring ends to see how that go. And yeah, so now that we've been properly warmed up by reviewing a few kings, let's talk about who we are actually rating today, who are ranking today.
Let's get to the topic at
hand.
So
first of all, Darius the Great. Yes, Darius the Great, he is the head of this group. This is called the Darius the Great group. He is our highest scorer. He's very impressive. So, who is he? What happened to him? He was a distant cousin of the royal dynasty, if at all he was. And what he did is he managed to kill and usurp Bardia, who was the legitimate king. Mm-hmm. Not only that, he made sure that he would rewrite the histories to say that actually, no, Bardia was an imposter and he did the right thing by killing him. Also, Darius was anyway the legitimate heir because he was a distant cousin, and that actually made it all okay. So nobody look into this too much, please. Mm-hmm. It'll be fine. So that is the claim to fame, and then afterwards there is a massive series of wars because nobody believes him at the start. Everything explodes in rebellions, and he has to basically reconquer the empire one province at a time. We have all these different events. He crucifies a bunch of different kings, and he builds a big monument at Behistun, which shows him with all the kings he's defeated kneeling before him as he is finally victorious. And, well, thanks to reconquering the empire, he manages to restructure as he likes. He makes it more centralized. No longer is it sort of a Parthian-style empire with many vassal kings like it was under Cyrus, but now it is a unified, single-minded empire, where he has satraps he appoints. The satrapies are now a thing. They'll be used for centuries afterwards, but Darius is essentially the empire that is the basis for all the other ones we'll see. He's the one that the Sassanids will try and imitate. He is that important. He also introduces the first standardized use of money. He has the darics and the sigloi, which are now the first use of money. It's not massively used across the empire, but it is for big purchases. He founds roads. He makes the big royal road that crosses all of the empire, great infrastructure. He has messengers, a postal system that can essentially go day and night constantly. They have frequent enough relays among road stations that he can actually get news across the empire as quickly as possible, which is very cool. He also basically builds sort of a Suez Canal. He connects the Nile to the Red Sea, so you can go from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, and that's really cool.
Yep.
Especially for the time. He then has a series of different wars, for example. He conquers India, which is a massive source, or, the province of India, the Indus River Valley, which is a massive source of money for all the empire. He has a war against the Scythians up in the north, which is essentially these nomadic people who had killed Cyrus, and though he doesn't conquer them, he at least manages to get them to back off, which is quite impressive. And then he has these wars against the Greeks. There is a Greek rebellion in Anatolia. He crushes that one and then takes revenge on one of the two Greek city-states that had aided them, and tries to take revenge on Athens. Doesn't really succeed there, but overall, he was preparing a new expedition. He's happy enough with that. He also founds the structural basis for the great capital of Persepolis. It will be beautified and finished by his son Xerxes, but Darius puts the groundwork there. And then finally, a reason we found Achaemenid king portraits slightly boring is that they all imitate Darius.
Yep.
Because he is so interesting that everybody says, no, I want to look like him. He is amazing. So overall, Darius the Great, just to recap his scores, he had a 0 out of 10 for final moments, as we know, 18 out of 20 for battle hardness, one of the top scores, a 20 for scheminess, the highest score that he could possibly get. We'll discuss that later on. A 14 out of 20 for shock factor, very good categories. Could have been worse, but still quite impressive. Top score in Aaron Shine, 20 out of 20, very cool. And then a 4.5 out of 5 for Face of Faces, because he established the iconography for everyone else. And finally, a 3.6 out of 5 for Lengthiness, for a healthy reign of 36 years. So that is Darius the Great. He is definitely the man to beat.
Yep.
So let's see if anybody else will give you any thought.
I want to be mad at him for making every portrait look the same, but that's hardly his fault. Like, if anything, it's just the fault of the rest of the kings for not being original.
Yeah, exactly. If he looked very cool, then I mean, he did a good job. He did well. Okay, and next in our group is Seleucus I Nicator. Seleucus was born as a relatively minor noble in Macedon, and then he joined Alexander the Great in his conquests. He conquered all the empire, and at last, when Alexander died, we had to decide what happens. An interesting thing about Seleucus that we notice is that he actually loved his Persian wife. Because if you remember, Alexander made everybody get a Persian wife. Seleucus, after Alexander's death, Seleucus was the only one that didn't divorce her.
True.
So presumably they liked each other and had a nice relationship. So Seleucus and Apama, OTP.
Mm-hmm.
They're very cute. We then get to the Wars of the Diadochoi, the whole aftermath of Alexander's death. Essentially, what we have is that Seleucus at first is just a minor individual. It seems that at the start he may have been involved in the plot to kill the first regent Perdiccas. Then he got a little bit of a small satrapy for himself around Babylon. He then lost that against Antigonus and fled to Ptolemy, his longtime friend and eventually rival. He was an admiral for Ptolemy's fleet for a while, did a really cool job there. That was impressive. And then afterwards, he just took 1,000 men during a crucial point and managed to reconquer Babylon. And from those tiny roots, he managed to take over all the east of the empire, which was very impressive. We were very incredibly impressed to do this, especially when Antigonus, the guy who was most likely to almost reunify the empire, tried to attack Seleucus. Seleucus managed to win nonetheless. Managed to do some just great times. He did some night attacks where he just targeted officers and managed to get all the soldiers to change sides. Very impressive, very cool stuff. Seleucus then went all the way to the east towards India, where he fought a small war with the Maurya Empire against Chandragupta Maurya. But they ended up making a deal. Chandragupta gave him 500 elephants. Seleucus used those 500 elephants to defeat Antigonus in the west, and in the east, everything was nice and stable. So when he was in the west, he managed to defeat Antigonus and take over the vast majority of what was Alexander's empire. He then managed to actually rule this empire properly, unlike Alexander. He managed to build a bunch of cities with Greek settlers, organize things properly so that trade would flow and the war-torn regions would improve. He gave a new mixed soul to the empire, with his essentially half Iranian son strongly integrated into the administration, ruling the east of the empire. And essentially he organized it so that, yes, we're sort of following old Achaemenid traditions, but this is a new Macedonian kingdom.
Yeah.
And he founded the whole Seleucid Empire. That's just a very interesting feat to do. And then towards the end of his life, he almost managed to fully reconquer Alexander's empire before he was... He almost managed to reconquer Alexander's empire by defeating Lysimachus, one of the other successors, and marching all the way into Macedon. But before he could get back home to Macedon where he was born, you'll remember that he was killed by Ptolemy Karaunos, one of the sons of Ptolemy, who just stabbed him and tried to take Macedon for himself. So Seleucus got very, very close to it, but ultimately failed. But the cool thing is that he managed to build a legacy that lasted for centuries after him. You know, the Seleucid Empire ended poorly, of course, like all empires do, but he did at least manage to found it and make sure that it was all a new entity. So this is Seleucus. Did anything spring to mind when I mentioned him? You didn't remember him very well before?
Yeah, not much in particular. Sadly.
Okay, and how would you compare him to Darius the Great, just as a starting point?
Well, he is... The thing is, with Darius... If Darius had were just as mythical as kings before him, all of these feats wouldn't be that impressive. But since we do have proof that he did all of these things for the Empire, that makes it really hard to beat. However...
Oh, yeah.
Seleucus feels more rooted in reality. Because it's
feels very much
not so far away in time. So, like, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's very impressive, like, at least from a conquering point of view. And
yeah, I'll tell you what scores we gave him. So we gave him a 6 out of 10 for final moments, a 20 out of 20 for battle hardness. We were very impressed by his skills at, you know, basically conquering an empire starting from 1,000 men and managing to retake everything and almost reunify Alexander's empire. We were very impressed by that. An 8 out of 20 for scheminess for his plots and night attacks. And 8 out of 20 for shock factor. He did kind of give his second wife to his son because he was in love with her. That was a bit weird.
Yeah, I did not love that.
You know, happens. And then for Ehrenstein, we gave him a 16 out of 20 because he is a foreign ruler, but he is doing quite a good job for Iran overall. So we were impressed by that. And then for Face of Faces, we gave him a 5 out of 5 because he had a very cool bust where you could actually see his face. You could recognize him as a full person, which was always nice to see. And finally, for lengthiness, he got 2.8 out of 5 for 28 years of reign, which very impressive overall. It's nice to stand tall there. So overall, compared to Darius, he is better in Face of Faces and battle hardness. But we'll have to see how he stands up against the other contenders. So next up, we have Antiochus IV Epiphanes. He was one of the Seleucids after Antiochus the Great. He was shipped off to Rome as a hostage as a young man. And he was raised in Rome, ruled there for a while, but then eventually found his opportunity when his brother died. So he escaped from Rome, went all the way to Syria. There he killed his nephew and married his sister.
Sure. Starting
a trend.
Yeah.
Not ideal. This was Antiochus the child, which didn't even get a number because he ruled so little.
Yeah.
Antiochus IV then tried to take over Egypt and did an amazing job. There was a civil war. He almost managed to unify the Seleucid Empire with Egypt, but then he failed due to Roman interference. You remember Popilius Lena just going all the way to
Romans,
going all the way to Egypt, drawing a circle around Antiochus and saying, "No, you decide now. No consulting with your counselors about if you should finish up this war or go to war to Rome. You just decide now or not." And Antiochus said, "Okay, actually, fine. You can keep Egypt. I'll retire to my kingdom."
Terrible.
But when he went home, he had a whole mock Roman triumph, saying, actually, I won, everything is fine, don't worry, trust me.
Which makes it worse.
Because he lived in Rome, he remembered that, he also then, it was also under his reign that the Jewish revolt started up. He's the bad guy of the Hanukkah story.
Yep.
He is the evil King Antiochus who tries to suppress the Jewish religion, and, well, that's how he's mostly remembered. He was also known in general for his lavish parties and love of luxury. He was known as, disguising himself as a common person, going in the streets and having chats with people, having drinking parties. He likes to have fun.
True.
But politically, it looks like he generally tried to improve the empire and tried to consolidate the East eventually, because it was sort of fraying at the edges. The Parthians were starting to be a bit noisy. And he eventually just died of mysterious causes, leaving his son as a ruler overall.
Mm-hmm.
So Antiochus IV had as scores a 6 out of 10 for vital moments, because is he murdered, is he not? There was sort of suspicious circumstances around his death. An 11 out of 20 for battle hardness. He did kind of conquer Egypt, but
also lost it immediately.
Properly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Then a 4 out of 20 for scheminess, because, well, he did kill his nephew and everything. There was something there. 15 out of 20 for shock factor, because of bowing down to the Romans, having a mock Roman triumph, being
that was
broadly
a choice,
dissolute,
for sure,
traditional Eastern king. Yes, exactly. He then had an Aaron Shine of 8 out of 20. He tried, but honestly didn't do a great job.
Yeah.
Portrait, only
so much
2 out of 5. Yeah, exactly. Portrait, only a 2 out of 5, because we just had a coin. It was nothing too special. And lengthiness, 1.2, which is 12 years overall. So out of the three, at least score-wise, he is the least impressive. Would you... Do you think he sort of stands up to one of our previous contestants in some way, or do you think he is
I think our scores,
bottom of the barrel for now?
Well, I think our scores make sense. Like, I agree with our decision at the time, because it's so disappointing because he could have done so much better, but I think this is one of the first times when we encountered this with our kings, where you're like, oh, things were going so well, if only this and this hadn't happened. But I agree with the scores we gave him, and I think in the end it did not happen. When like the potential is still there. That's why he got a Shahanshah anyway, because the story is interesting and it goes here and there. But
Also, he's a bit of a chaos gremlin, which I like.
Yes.
About him. If I can remember, I think you were reluctant to give him Shahanshah at the first, and I insisted. Because I like the great chaos gremlinness of him.
That sounds correct. But no, I agree.
But yes, our fourth contestant is Alexander the Great, also known as Alexander III of Macedon. Well, we all know about Alexander the Great, but let's recap what his life is. What is his deal? He was the son of Philip of Macedon, great king who reformed his kingdom. Alexander was handed a beautiful new kingdom that he could use to conquer all he wished. He was supposedly the son of a god. He went to an oracle who told him, nope, you're totally the son of a god. Have fun with it.
That's what he needed to hear,
Good times overall. Yeah, exactly. He does an extremely foolhardy thing and conquers the Achaemenid Empire. He does that several times, refusing to stop, and he has several opportunities where he might just starve his army to death, but he keeps going, he keeps gambling. Even when Darius III offers him half the empire, his daughter's hand in marriage, everything will be fine. Let's just, the best peace treaty he could possibly imagine. Alexander says, no, it's either everything or nothing. I will not go by these half measures. And Alexander wins,
Yep, which is infuriating.
That's why he's remembered. He does everything correctly. It works out for him. He then tries to mix the souls of his new empires. He tries to sort of mix the Macedonians with the Iranians. He tries to sort of have these mixed marriages I mentioned with Seleucus before, so that everybody can sort of be together. He starts to wear Persian clothes. He tries to act as a king of kings, but that has mixed success because his Macedonians think that he's pandering to people that are conquered, and the Iranians say, I mean, yes, you're making a big show of being conciliatory, but ultimately we are a subject people now, so is this really anything? Then Alexander goes all the way. He wants to keep going until he hits the sunrise. He invades India, but eventually is forced to turn back by his own men, who tell him, no, listen, Alex, this has gone too far. We have to go home. It's been 10 years we've been marching. Please let us go home. On the way back, he then crosses the Gadrosian Desert. He thinks that he's so much better than Cyrus, he can cross this desert, but so many of his men died. There's this whole terrible scene, but to Alexander's credit, he refuses special attention and says that, well, if they're all going to die, they're all going to die. He's not going to be the only survivor.
I guess. I mean, the one redeemable quality, but you're still killing your entire army. I don't know if that's good. He's like, at least I'll go out with them. I'm like, yeah? But like, why?
You could have avoided it, but okay. Then we have his love stories with Hephaestion and Bagoas.
Bagoas, I forgot. Oh my god.
Bagoas is a good lad. Bagoas eventually disappears from history, but Hephaestion, we know that Hephaestion dies tragically of disease or whatever it might have been. And Alexander kind of goes mad with grief. Like, even before this, he was killing a bunch of his friends for opposing him and trying to limit him. But now, after the death of Hephaestion, he really starts drinking heavily. His wife gets pregnant for the first time, so, stuff. He starts to really feel his mortality and think, oh no, I should plan for things after me. But then eventually he dies of, we discussed this earlier, mysterious reasons. Many are possible. And then eventually the empire just goes away. And who should succeed him? And he answers, the strongest.
Yeah, thank you. Oh my god, this still infuriates me. Are truly not fit to rule. Incredible general, truly not fit to rule.
Let's look at Alexander's scores. He had a 9 out of 10 for final moments, one of our top scores, as we said before. 20 out of 20 for battle hardness. He's Alexander the Great.
If you don't give it to him, I don't know who you're going to give it to. Yeah.
Yep. He has a 17 out of 20, one of our highest scheminess scores.
Yeah.
Because we're not sure if he killed his father or if he did it with his mother. He managed to handle a lot of things very mysteriously. He had a lot of plots in the court that he cut the heads off of very effectively. He also made himself a god officially, which is kind of shocking. That's very schemy of him. And well, for shock factor, he also gets the maximum score. He got a 20 out of 20 because of all the purges he does. The trying to mix different cultures but failing.
The rampages.
The killing all of his friends. Yeah, exactly. The trying to go all the way to the end of the earth and then crying when he couldn't do it. The fact that he hadn't even conquered one world just made him weep with sadness when he learned that maybe there were other worlds. The fact that he hadn't conquered even one just made him weep. So,
oh my god, this man.
That's shocking. Exactly. That is the reaction for Alexander. Ehrenstein, we gave him a 0 because he burnt Persepolis to the ground, a city that was his to own. He just said, no, let's burn it. This will be cool. This is revenge for Athens. Here you go.
He didn't secure his own legacy. He did not rule the places he conquered. He didn't even consolidate the places he conquered. And he, purposefully sometimes just destroyed them. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Not a monarch that you
would want. A very bad ruler.
Yep.
Great conqueror, bad ruler.
Mm-hmm.
And then Face of Faces, he got a 5 out of 5 because, well, he had the iconic Alexander busts. His image is so iconic that everybody for centuries afterwards will just try and imitate his hairstyle.
Similarly
because
to
they want
Darius.
To be more like him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Darius.
So it's a very impressive image. And for lengthiness, instead, he has the shortest score of the ones we've had so far. He has a 0.7 out of 5 for 7 years of reign. in Iran because, well, he ultimately dies very young. So Alexander is one of our top scorers here. He has the best final moments of all the people we're covering right now. He has the best battle hardness. He has one of the best scheminess. He is second to Darius in scheminess, to be fair.
Yeah.
He has the highest shock factor of anybody in the podcast, but also is one of the lowest in Aaron Shine. That's very disappointing.
Yeah, I feel like this is how I feel about Alexander in general. He's such an interesting story
definitely.
and so good at some things, and then you actually look into him and you're like, wait, but but he was so bad at his job, actually.
So how do you think he stacks up against our previous three fellows? How do you think he stacks up against Darius, Seleucus, and Antiochus IV?
That's interesting.
Because all of these were better at ruling the empire than him.
Yes.
But
he
who is
has
more
a great story.
Aaron Shiny? Yes, who is more Shahanshai?
Yeah, that's different.
Yes.
I still don't want him to get the best score because I think he is very memorable, but maybe not just in the history of Persia, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, he is in this category for a reason.
Yeah.
We just have to decide, is it worth for him to go on to the next step, or is it just
it's going to be
enough
difficult.
that he showed up, enough that he participated, and maybe Seleucus or Antiochus or Darius are better than him,
Can't
or
wait
at least
for
deserve more to go
the
on
comments
to the
to
next
come
stage.
in.
Yes, absolutely. Please
Sure, people will
let us
all
know your opinions.
agree with
This will
us.
be on social media.
Yeah.
Yes. And last but possibly least is our lowest scoring Shahanshah, Sinatruces I.
So why is he here?
Sinatruces was a king during the Dark Ages, during the Parthian Dark Ages. Why are they Dark Ages? Because there were a bunch of civil wars. We didn't have many sources because the Romans were too far away. Essentially, he started off as a rebel after the death of Mithridates II, Mithridates the Great, and he ruled the East for a while, trying to take control, sort of bugging the local kings that were in charge in Seleucia on the Tigris. But after a while, Sinatruces finally managed to become king of all the empire, ending a period of instability. He manages to restabilize things and make sure that it is all more orderly and stable. And he does this with the help of the Saka nomads. So he also gets to have very cool stags on his crown. So he gets to have a neat hat, which we thought was a very good part of him.
True.
Then eventually, when he hears about war was with the Romans, Mithridates of Pontus, Poison King in the west, starts to fight the Romans. He tries to ask Sinatruces for help to fight the Romans and stop them before they can get into Asia. Sinatruces says, listen, I'm a very old man. I'm very tired. Just handle your own problems.
Leave me alone.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Sinatruces in the end manages to generally stabilize things overall, and he gets to die as a very old man at like 87 years old. So he has a relatively good run. It's nothing as immensely flashy as other people we've seen before, but it's at least a stabilization of the empire. He does what's best for his people and rules justly and properly. As for his scores, he got a 2 out of 10 for final moments. We were impressed by the fact that he managed to die at an old age. 6 out of 20 for battle hardness. He does kind of reconquer the empire, but after a civil war, and he is relatively unstable in a civil war for a while. 0 points of scheminess, nothing there. 3 points of shock factor for, using the nomads to take over the empire. That was roughly his vibe. And then we get 8 points of Aaron Shine, where the empire's slightly better off because it's stable again, but he did use nomads to invade it, and he did cause a civil war in the first place, so we thought that was a bit of a back and forth. Then Face to Face is a 4.3 out of 5, which was very good because we thought he had a really cool hat. It has stags on it. It's really badass.
Yes, I forget sometimes. True.
Yes. And then finally, for lengthiness, lowest lengthiness of all this category, he has a 0.6 out of 5 for only 6 years of proper rule of all the empire. So Sinatruces, I would argue, is definitely the weakest of the bunch. I think it's worth it that he was here, but definitely not my choice for person
Thank you
who
for
goes
coming
through into the next
so
round.
long. Thanks for all the fish.
Yeah, exactly. You can get a fruit basket.
Mm.
So okay, Serial. Now is the time to decide who we're going to get through. So first of all, is there anybody you're immediately excluding? Is there anybody that you say, no, absolutely, you're not one of the top two?
Well, I think Sinatruces, I think he deserved the Shahanshah, but I think compared to the other contestants we have, I don't think he will make it to the top two.
Okay. So Sinatruces, while he was off hunting in the Paradise Gardens,
I'm
his
glad
horse falls in a hole.
I'm glad that we
off,
reviewed him, and that we got to talk about him again. But we have very strong contestants in this round.
Yeah, this is a tough round to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next up, we have our top four. Darius the Great, Seleucus Nicator, Antiochus IV, and Alexander the Great. Do you think there's another person that you would immediately throw out? Or are you already struggling between these top four?
What did you say? Alexander? Seleucus?
Alexander, Antiochus IV, Darius the Great, and Seleucus the First.
So, like, the most... I feel like my first instinct was to get Darius and Alexander to the next round. But I still think Antiochus and Seleucus have a very interesting story. So I think we should discuss it.
Yes, definitely. I think that... So, in my heart, I think that Antiochus IV is interesting, but doesn't stand up to all the other ones.
Fair.
I feel like he is the one to be blocked off.
Mm.
And my real discussion is between Darius the Great, Seleucus I, and Alexander the Great.
Yes.
With Alexander and Seleucus being my second place fighting for. I think Darius definitely gets through.
Yes, I agree with that.
Between
also,
Seleucus and Alexander, we'll see.
I'm just now thinking, what would be ideally what we're trying to decide with these rounds? And I think what I would like to decide is if I have to tell somebody, oh, have you never heard of the Persian Empire? This is the one king that I would bring up. Like the one story.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Mm-hmm.
So, I have to say, I don't think I would bring up Alexander the Great in that case.
That's fair.
Because he's not as relevant to the Persian Empire on account of how, yes, he does conquer it and expands it, but then immediately sends it into chaos.
But as a counter argument to that, would you, like... I have no idea what normal people think because I'm too down in this rabbit hole.
True.
But...
Still thinking of that XKCD comic of how much people know about a subject.
Because I think that Alexander the Great is mostly seen as a Greek king, right?
Yes.
Or Macedonian king, depending on how detailed you want to be. Do you think it would be worth telling people, no, wait, Alexander the Great did this whole cool, interesting thing in the East? Like, he did wear makeup and fancy Persian robes, and he had a Persian boy who was his lover, and tried to unify the two empires.
I think that is relevant.
Worth?
I think that is relevant to Alexander's story, and he should be presented not just as a Greek king or Macedonian king, but also as a Persian ruler. Because he did have a huge impact on the empire in the fact that he kicked off an entire Hellenistic period as well.
Mm-hmm.
So not only was he influenced by the Persian Empire, but also his presence influenced how it would be ruled.
Yes.
But I don't think I would bring him up as a good example of what a Persian king is.
Okay.
If that makes sense? But he's so important too.
Fair. Yeah.
Maybe we can have the discussion later.
Let's instead... Okay, so first of all, let's say Antiochus IV is just caught by a stray arrow, and he is not... he is not in charge of this top three. Okay, so top three instead, let's make arguments for and against Seleucus Nicator. Seleucus Nicator, I would say for him, he founds an empire that is actually stable and has a legacy. And he does change, you can argue that he does change the nature of the empire more than Alexander did, because he actually has time to do things. Like, he settles the area with a bunch of Greek cities, he makes it more of a new thing, and also by having his son be half Iranian, he actually achieves what Alexander didn't manage to create a unified empire at last.
Yes.
Against him, you could say that, well, he isn't especially Iranian, right, himself. He does have an Iranian wife, but mostly you can see that a lot of his fighting, a lot of his concentration is based around the Mediterranean and trying to, fight Lysimachus and finally make his way back to Macedon. That's, as one of his last acts, he appoints his son as king of all of Asia, and he says, okay, I'll just rule Europe in my old age, and that'll be it. So maybe if that was everything he always wanted, well, does he really deserve to go forward in our categories?
You are correct, and I don't know why I'm fighting this. We should go with Darius and Alexander. They're clearly the most interesting
Alexander?
and relevant.
Despite Seleucus. So, again, I would say that the cool thing about Seleucus is that he does it basically all on his own.
Yeah.
Like, he starts out with, 1,000 men. He just marches into Babylon, takes everything. Alexander, you could argue that without Philip of Macedon, Alexander would have just been a random other minor king. While Seleucus pulled himself up on his own, did everything by himself.
You're not helping.
King of Kings. I'm trying not to help.
Great.
Is there any possibility, Serial, of refusing Darius the Great?
No.
Can you think of any arguments why not?
I do not want to invoke the wrath of Plumas, but also I think that he should be in our...
Plumas will murder us, but yes.
In our next...
Yeah, I agree. So so for Seleucus or Alexander, the question is... Because, basically my doubt is that I think Seleucus has a very good story and isn't as well known. So in your argument of saying, hey, have you heard of an Iranian king of kings? Can you just tell me about a random one? I'd say, hey, Seleucus is pretty cool. He did a bunch of interesting things. He changed the soul of the empire. Well, everybody kind of already knows Alexander, so you're more likely to be surprised by
which was my original argument, but
Yes. But Alexander, he's just Alexander. Like, he is so...
You know what?
He's just so impressive.
No, I am done with him. People can keep kissing his ass in a different podcast. He's not going to make it to the next round. We're going to go with Seleucus. And if people are mad, you can write to me on social media. I don't care.
Yes, fair. So, you're locking in the fact that Alexander the Great, not as cool as Seleucus Nicator, isn't worth being known as a king of kings. He gets to stop here.
Yes.
All right.
Why are you making it my choice? You also have voting power in this. You're like, I'm just gonna
I've been describing things to you.
Charge with the blame,
Yeah. I feel like I like Seleucus more as a person. I think
that is fair. I also
Alexander's
like him more.
Interesting.
But
Seleucus, he loves his wife. He wants to rule an empire properly. He cares about.
So you're saying you're against
order.
Bisexuals or possibly just gay men. That's what I'm hearing. If you don't love your wife,
we have no proof of everything Seleucus was up to.
Yeah.
He may have had things on the side. We don't. I mean, write your Seleucus/Ptolemy fan fiction, please. That would be great.
I would read that. Yes, no, obviously I am kidding.
But yeah. Yeah. But no, I think I agree with your point. I think Alexander's cool, you should know about him. But if I'm going to tell somebody about someone they haven't heard of, somebody that they, that they're more likely to be excited about learning.
Yes.
I mean, I didn't know much about Seleucus when I started up, but I thought, oh, wow, this guy's really interesting. This guy's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yes, we can go for Darius the Great and Seleucus Nicator through the gates into the next rounds, while Alexander the Great, he had a bit too much to drink. Unfortunately, he decided to get into a fist fight with a lion, and the lion devoured him. So, sorry, Alexander.
Honestly, that is on brand.
You tried. You'll look cool.
No, I think that would have happened, so...
Yes, while Darius and Seleucus managed to catch their prey and move on to the second round, where they'll eventually be playing up against the winners of the next rounds. Who knows? They won't be facing each other again unless they both get to the semifinals.
Mm-hmm.
But so that means that Darius, as our first winner, goes into round 1, while Seleucus is going to get into round 2. Congratulations, the both of you. So there we go. We finished our first round. Congratulations. We hope you'll join us next time for round 2. Round 2 is also going to be an interesting one. I think there's only one very easy round to decide here, and it's definitely not round 2. Because round 2 is going to have Shapur the second, Orodes the second, Kavad the first, Vologases the fourth, and Mithridates the Great.
Oof. Yeah,
Going to be a tough one. Yeah, we'll find out next time what we think as we'll recap all of these and see what how they stack up against each other.
And like I said, if you want to re-listen to the episodes of said Kings, then it might be a good idea. You have a whole week until the next episode is out anyway, so good way to pass.
Yeah, exactly. Make up your own opinions so you can yell at us with conscience of what you're saying.
Yes.
So you know. And in that case, if you'd like to support us in different ways, you can do it. You can join us on Patreon, where we have a bunch of extra episodes. This month, we'll be coming out with our second Intelligent Speech Conference, where I'll be talking about a bunch of royal imposters in Iranian history. So you could hear about all these different Seleucid kings that were imposters. You can hear a bit about Darius. You can hear a bit about Theodosius at the end with Khosrow II. There will be a lot of cool stuff there, so you're welcome to join. Alternatively, you can support us non-monetarily through a review on your podcast app of choice. Tell people who you think should win at the end. Tell people why you should listen. Tell people who they should listen to first. It's just going to be a great time, and it'll be nice to have people along with us as we are on the final legs of our journey. And yeah, that's all we have here for today. We hope you join us next time, and in the meantime, we hope you have a lovely goodbye.